Okay, let's dive in. Science and faith. It's a topic that, well, it really gets people talking, doesn't it?
It really does. And so often the immediate reaction is, conflict. Like it's got to be one or the other.
Exactly. Science on one side, all observation, evidence, experiments,
Right. Tangible stuff.
and then faith on the other, trust, purpose, maybe something unseen. Seems like polar opposites.
That's the common picture for sure. But what we want to do in this deep dive is explore if that's the whole picture.
Yeah, maybe it's more complex, maybe even hopeful.
That's the idea. We've dug into some really fascinating source material, and we want to give you a kind of shortcut to understanding how these two seemingly different ways of knowing might actually work together.
Okay, so where do we start? I guess with that perceived clash everyone talks about.
Makes sense. So fundamentally, you could say they often operate in different realms, asking different kinds of questions.
Right, science is usually asking how. How does the universe work? How do diseases spread? What are the physical laws?
It's focused on mechanisms, processes. But faith tends to ask why.
Why are we even here?
Hmm.
Is there a bigger picture, a meaning to it all? Maybe even a creator?
Precisely. And that distinction is so important because historically, you've got these big moments by, like, think Galileo or the debates around evolution.
Oh yeah, those definitely stick in your mind as science versus religion, full stop.
They do. They've really cemented this feeling of conflict. But when you look closer, as our sources suggest,
It's maybe not so black and white.
rarely is. Often these clashes were about misunderstandings or maybe institutional power, not necessarily science refuting faith itself.
So the core idea is that the conflict often comes from mixing up the questions.
Yeah,
Asking science to answer a why question or faith to provide a how mechanism.
exactly. It's like they're trying to achieve different things. One focuses on the how, the other on the why. They're not really direct competitors on the same field.
Okay, that reframes things a bit. But here's where, for me, it gets really interesting. Looking back at history, it kind of flips the script, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. It's actually quite surprising for many people to learn that modern science wasn't born in opposition to faith. Often quite the reverse.
Yeah, the pioneers, the people who laid the groundwork,
Yeah.
many had deep religious faith.
Deep faith. It wasn't some kind of barrier they had to overcome. For many, it was actually the inspiration.
I mean, Isaac Newton. You can't get much bigger in science, right? Laws of motion, gravity.
The foundations of classical physics.
And yet he spent a huge amount of time on biblical studies, theology.
Yeah, it wasn't just a hobby. He saw it all as connected. Understanding the how of the universe was, for him, linked to understanding the mind of its creator.
And he wasn't some isolated case either.
Not at all. Think about Johannes Kepler. Brilliant astronomer, figured out planetary motion. He literally said he felt like he was thinking God's thoughts after him.
Wow. So the science was the theology, in a way.
For him, yes. Exploring the heavens was an act of devotion. And then there's Gregor Mendel.
The father of genetics.
Right. And he was an Augustinian monk, doing his groundbreaking pea plant experiments in a monastery garden.
A monk. That's pretty amazing. What does that tell us? That these brilliant scientific minds saw faith not as a contradiction, but maybe as a foundation.
It strongly suggests that. For them, the belief in a rational, orderly creator gave them the confidence that the universe would be governed by rational, understandable laws.
Laws that could be discovered, studied.
Measured. Exactly. It wasn't just coexistence. Their faith actually provided a philosophical basis, a motivation to even do the science in the first place. It fueled the whole enterprise.
Okay, so that's the history, a much more intertwined relationship than many assume. How does that translate to today? Are people still seeing it that way?
Well, our sources indicate a definite movement among some scientists and thinkers today to kind of reclaim that idea, not just coexistence, but actual complementarity.
Meaning they can actively support each other.
Yeah, offering different but equally valuable perspectives on the same reality.
Okay, give me an example, like the Big Bang.
The Big Bang is a great example. Science gives us this incredible picture. The universe starting about 13.8 billion years ago, expanding from this incredibly hot, dense state. That's the how and the what.
Right, the scientific account.
And then you have a faith perspective, maybe something like, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth.
Which sounds potentially contradictory on the surface.
But maybe it isn't. Perhaps they aren't competing explanations for the mechanism, but different layers of understanding. Science describes what happened, step by step. Faith steps back and asks, why did it happen? What does this beginning mean for us?
So one's about the process, the other's about the purpose or the source.
You could put it that way. Or think of it like this. Imagine a really complex, beautifully engineered machine.
Okay.
Science is like reading the technical manual. It tells you how every gear fits, how the circuits work, the physics behind it, all the hows.
Got it. The blueprint and the operating instructions.
Exactly. But faith is more like exploring why the machine was built in the first place. What was the intention? What's its ultimate purpose?
Ah, okay. So you need both the manual and the understanding of purpose to really grasp the whole thing.
That's the argument. For a full, holistic understanding, you arguably benefit from both perspectives. The how and the why together give you a much richer picture.
That makes sense. But even with that idea of complementarity, you still run into these really persistent myths that keep the conflict narrative alive.
Oh, absolutely. They're hard to shake.
What's the biggest one we need to tackle?
Probably the idea that science disproves God. You hear that a lot.
Yeah. Or that science makes God unnecessary.
Right. But this really misunderstands what science is and what it can do. Science is fundamentally about explaining the natural, observable world.
Through evidence, testing, prediction.
Exactly. It operates within those boundaries. It just doesn't have the tools, the methodology to prove or disprove things that might lie outside that natural realm. Metaphysical questions, ultimate existence, the spiritual.
So asking science to disprove God is like, what?
It's like asking a thermometer to measure love, or a telescope to detect sadness. It's just not designed for that category of question. Its silence on the matter doesn't mean denial.
Okay, that's a clear boundary. What about the flip side? The idea that faith means rejecting evidence or reason.
That's another really pervasive myth. And look, maybe some forms of faith do seem to operate that way, but thoughtful, mature faith generally doesn't.
It doesn't have to be blind belief.
Not at all. Many, many people of faith fully embrace scientific discovery. They see it as learning more about the world, which can even deepen their faith. It's not about fearing evidence.
So it's more like trust informed by other things, like experience or reason or intuition.
Exactly. Faith, at its best, isn't an intellectual shutdown. It's an engagement with reality on multiple levels, including the rational and the experiential.
Okay, so if we get past the idea of conflict and we debunk these myths, what does it look like when science and faith actually work together? How do they strengthen each other?
Well, there are real mutual benefits. Think about ethics, for instance. Science is incredibly powerful. It tells us what we can do, edit genes, create AI, unlock immense energy. It answers the can we.
But it doesn't always answer the should we.
Precisely. Faith traditions, with their long history of thinking about meaning, value, and human flourishing, can offer a crucial ethical framework. They prompt that vital should we question. They provide a moral compass.
That's a really important role, especially now. And what does science offer back to faith?
Science can offer faith, let's say context, and maybe even a kind of credibility in our modern world.
How so?
Well, scientific discoveries, the sheer scale of the cosmos, the incredible complexity of life, they can profoundly deepen our sense of wonder and awe.
Which can feed into a spiritual perspective.
Absolutely. It can enrich one's understanding of creation or whatever framework faith provides. It makes the universe seem more amazing, not less. It gives faith a grounding in the observable reality we all share.
So it's a two-way street. Ethics from faith, wonder, and context from science.
A potential synergy, yeah. Which leads to a kind of invitation, really.
An invitation.
Yeah. If you're coming from a place of faith, the message is, don't necessarily fear scientific inquiry. Let it stretch your understanding, deepen your awe.
Let it make your picture of reality bigger.
Right. And if you're coming from a more scientific or secular viewpoint, perhaps don't dismiss those deeper questions of meaning, purpose, the why questions.
Because they add another dimension to the pursuit of truth.
They can add richness, context, maybe even motivation. Exploring those questions doesn't mean abandoning reason. It means acknowledging the full spectrum of human curiosity.
So wrapping this up, the big takeaway seems to be the science and faith, they can coexist.
They absolutely can. But maybe even more than that, they can actually inform and strengthen each other.
It's not the simple battleground narrative we started with.
Not at all. It suggests that maybe the most profound understanding comes not from choosing sides, but from holding different perspectives in tension, letting them illuminate each other.
Like needing both eyes to see in 3 dimensions.
That's a great analogy. So perhaps the final thought for you to consider is this. The richest answers in life are rarely simple ethers.
They're often found in the both hand.
Exactly. Seeing science and faith not as enemies, but maybe as partners in this incredible human quest to understand ourselves, our world, and our place within it.
And when you embrace them together, you potentially get a much deeper, more complete, and ultimately more meaningful understanding of everything.
A more holistic view.
Mhm.
It enriches both the search for knowledge and the search for meaning.